Oh, that was about as good as I can hit a fairway wood. That's my 5 wood. It was straight. It was actually pretty long as well. So I take that every single day. So now let's have a go off the ground. That was off the tee. Oh, so does that ever happen to you? Great off the tee, terrible off the ground. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you why that's the case, because it's really common. Golfers struggle off the fairway with their fairway woods. I'm going to show you a really good fix so you can start to perform much, much better with this club. So let's show you why that first shot was so good and it felt incredible. So that first one, I had the ball teed up, if I can actually get it on a tee. Okay, and the best way to hit golf shots when the ball is on a tee, and this starts at the driving range, is to have the ball teed up nice and high and have your fairway wood bottoming out before the golf ball. It doesn't make contact with the ground and it starts to rise up into impact. And what happens is we get the ball right at the centre of the golf club, we get a lot of loft on the golf club, we get a clean strike, we get a high ball flight that travels really, really far. It's great, and we can do that consistently, and I'm sure you'll have done that when you're at the driving range. The problem becomes, as we start to remove the tee and the ball sits on the ground, that same technique of the club missing the ground and rising causes the contact to be low in the face. Now, you don't necessarily always have to top it, but if you strike the golf ball low in the face, the golf club is going to do something called gearing. What that means is as you strike low in the face, the club actually rocks back, and as the club and the ball leave each other, the club has got less loft. So even if you don't top it, you're going to get low launch angles that don't carry very far. So the technique that you use when the ball is on the tee will not work when the ball is on the ground. Therefore, you're going to need 2 swings with your fairway woods. That's way too difficult. There's a much easier way, and I'm going to teach it you in this video. So let's start with the ball on the ground. Let's get that down, let's get that nailed, and then we'll finish the video by looking at what you can do off the tee. It's going to be so much better for you to use your fairways this way. So, I set up, I swing the golf club around my body on a big circle. We want the bottom of that circle to pretty much be where the ball is. And the other message here, before we get into the kind of tips, would be that when you're hitting the ball from the ground, clearly we are here, your golf club has to make contact with the ground. If it doesn't, you can never use the centre of the golf club. That's really important. So when that ball is on the tee, my circle was way behind the ball. And we kind of said that works. So what are we going to do to move our circle to be more in line, if not even slightly forward of the golf ball? Well, I know it's often boring, got to talk setup. I know you're thinking, oh, Chris, I don't want to look at setup, but it's so important because if you don't get the setup right, you have got little to no chance of hitting this club correctly. So where do I want the ball? Well, I don't want it where driver would be, off that lead heel. That's too far forward. I want that ball to be slightly more inside from my heel. Now, it depends on where that camera is. It might look a little bit further back or forward, but I want it around about 1 to 2 inches inside my heel. The second thing I want to make sure is that I don't have the hands too far back behind the golf ball. So I want to make sure that my hands or the grip of the club are more inside my lead thigh. And here's the real point, the important part here. I actually want to start with a little bit more of my weight lead side. Now you can see that I'm doing that through my thighs and through my hips. It's a tiny movement. You might not even be able to see that. What I'd love you to do is feel this. Take a setup and just find that 50-50 point. You can just rock back and forth, find that 50-50 point, go into your posture, and then literally just move your thighs and hips towards the target, just to the point where you can feel a little bit more weight on that lead side. So now we've got the ball in a great position relative to your body. We've got a little bit more weight on the lead side, and we've got the club shaft nice and neutral. Everything about that setup is geared around the right contact. And when we're looking at 3-wood and performing with your 3-wood, it's basically strike that we've got to kind of nail down. So, here's the little exercise that you're going to do. As we've said, your golf club has to make contact with the ground. That's the first point. The second point is where that contact point is, and then the third point is how it contacts the ground. Let's go through all 3. Number 1, it contacts the ground. Number 2, where? Well, I would like that contact point to be starting where the ball is, and continuing around about 6 inches forward. And you'll find if you make some little swings and land on the ground, you'll notice that contact point, you know, does last for a good 4 to 5 inches. So I'm trying to get my golf club to land on the ground, starting where the ball is, continuing forwards. Now, if I was to hit a shot that way, that would actually give me a slight, very slight, negative attack angle. That's really key. So the first little exercise is literally just that. Take your setup inside a ball, make some really short swings, and just land the club target side of the ball. And this is what I would call a task drill. This is brilliant. I would love you to go ahead and do this. The reason a task drill is so powerful is because I'm setting the task. I'm building the framework that you're going to practice in. I've given the instruction of what to do, and what I know is going to happen is this. If your weight stays too static, you'll land the club too far back. So you haven't completed the task. What you will then start to do is realise that, do you know what? I've got to have some lateral shift. I've got to be moving my weight forward. So by setting a task and you performing that little motion and achieving that task, I know you're going to make the right movements. So starting to learn that actually when we're hitting these 3 woods, the last thing we want to be doing is stuck on that back foot. We actually want to be shifting onto that lead side. And that's one of the big problems with fairway woods, that people see such little loft. They maybe have a history of the ball going too low, and they tend to want to stay back in order to help it into the air. Works off a tee, doesn't work off the ground. So now we've got an understanding as to how the club is contacting the ground. The final one is how. If you come a little closer, and if you just watch me on this fresh bit of ground here, and just have a look at this golf club contacting the ground, what are you going to see? Well, you can see the sort of sand sort of jump up a little bit, and you can start to see where I'm brushing the ground. But am I making any real mark on the ground? Well, I'm not. Now contrast that to this. This is going to be a slightly different contact. Very different, okay? So you can see that there was a little bit more ground interaction, different contact. So it's no good having the golf club land on the right part of the ground if it's way too steep, if I'm starting to get really, really steep and just chop down on the golf ball. So I really want to be thinking about the sole of my club landing on the ground, not this kind of leading edge crashing into the ground. Okay, think of almost your club as kind of landing a plane, coming in very, very shallow, and it would contact the ground, but because it's the sole, it would just continue on its way. That was what was happening on those first little examples. On the second example, I tried to get it much steeper and got this leading edge crashing into the ground. So if you can start to get the right setup, you can start to appreciate where the club needs to land and then how it needs to land, you start to achieve this kind of perfect delivery. Now, if I do this, I should get a slightly negative attack angle. Now, kind of feeling like there's a bit of pressure on this now because I've got to hit a good shot. Okay, much, much better result than the first time I hit one off the ground. Attack angle was 1 degree down. Okay, 1 degree down. Now, come and have a look at my golf bag. That was 1 degree down, attack angle. My 7-iron is going to be around about 4 degrees down. My driver is going to be about 4 degrees up. So is my fairway wood closer in terms of attack angle to a 7-iron or a driver? It's actually closer to a 7-iron. 1 degree down, 4 degrees down. So when it's got a head cover and we put it in the top of our bag next to our driver, very often we approach this too much like a driver. We put it too far forward. We get told very often to sweep the ball into the air and to get it to launch really high. And what that can do is it can push the attack angle too close to a driver. It's got to almost feel an impact a little bit more like an iron, a little bit more of a downward strike. So that's the ground. Let's now go into what you would do from a tee. Now I need you to come in a little bit closer again for this. If I start to tee the ball really high like that, I'm going to struggle. because as soon as I have the club approaching correctly, I'm going to go straight under the ball. That's not going to get it done. And what's going to happen from there is I'm going to start to learn this kind of upward strike, which we've said is going to be quite detrimental to the ground. So here's the first thing I want you to do. When you're hitting your fairways from the tee, push that tee down. So you can see that's much, much lower. Now, I always want to use a tee because it raises the ball off and it makes contact much easier, but you can see that's teed much, much lower. Now, from there, what I can do now is, this is the key, this is the secret. What do I do when the ball is on the tee like that? I do exactly the same. That's the beauty of hitting the fairway this way, because you just need one swing. I don't have to now think about a different setup or a different approach. I can just do exactly the same. I've got it nicely teed up, so I'm going to get a better strike. But if I can make a swing where I still have the same ideas, I'm going to get a very, very similar result. So when I pull out 3-wood, 5-wood, 7-wood from my bag, I just want one swing. I want one concept. I don't want to have to think about what I do differently from from fairway to tee. So this time, what am I going to do? Absolutely nothing different. The only slight difference is that the ball is fractionally teed up.